The year was 1983. The global chessboard was frozen in the rigid geometry of the Cold War, yet the Middle East remained a fluid, volatile theater of proxy conflicts. In Damascus, the government of Hafez al-Assad, fortified by Soviet patronage and a deep-seated ideology of pan-Arab resistance, was pursuing strategic parity with its southern neighbor. The 1982 Lebanon War had been a tactical humiliation, showcasing the overwhelming technological superiority of the Israel Defense Forces, particularly in the air. For the Syrian High Command, the lesson was clear. Conventional warfare was untenable. The future of Syrian defense lay in deterrence, specifically in the realm of surface-to-surface ballistic missiles capable of striking deep into Israeli territory. This strategic pivot was embodied by one man, Dr. Basil al-Jamil. Al-Jamil was not a product of the Ba'athist military establishment. He was a quiet academic, a physicist by training, with degrees from the Sorbonne and a postdoctoral fellowship at the Bauman Moscow State Technical University. He was in his late 40s, balding with a preference for tweed jackets over military fatigues. He was a nationalist, but not a zealot. He was a man of science who believed Syria's sovereignty depended on indigenous technological advancement, not perpetual reliance on Soviet hardware. His brilliance was his ability to synthesize disparate fields. Where the Soviets provided Scuds, infamously inaccurate liquid-fueled systems, al-Jamil envisioned something far more dangerous: a solid propellant, precision-guided missile. His research, conducted under the deepest cover, focused on advanced propellant chemistry and, crucially, on mastering the complex inertial navigation systems that would allow a warhead to strike a target the size of the Kiryat in Tel Aviv. To house this ambition, the Syrian state had spared no expense. Facility 771 was a masterpiece of clandestine engineering, buried deep beneath the arid rocky expanse of the Kalamun Mountains, northeast of the capital. On the surface, it was the Kalamun Geological Survey Institute, a sleepy civilian outpost. Beneath, accessed by freight elevators large enough to move missile components, lay a multi-level complex. It featured vibration-damped laboratories for gyroscope calibration, reinforced bunkers for static engine tests, and chemical workshops for mixing the sensitive solid fuel compounds. It was air-gapped, connected to the outside world only by secure landlines and a rotation of trusted personnel. Dr. Al-Jamil was the program's director, its chief theorist, and its single point of failure. He was provided with a comfortable villa in the affluent Malki district of Damascus, a black Tatra sedan for his personal use, and the protection of the Syrian Republican Guard. He was, in effect, a national treasure, shielded from the world. Across the border, in Tel Aviv, the mood was one of sustained, high-level anxiety. The Intelligence Directorate of the Mossad, formerly the Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations, operated under a doctrine of absolute defense. The concept of an existential threat was not theoretical. It was a daily operational directive. The Syrian missile program was the direct responsibility of the Tsumet Junction Division, responsible for recruiting and running human assets, and Caesarea, the operational division tasked with special projects. The file on Syria's missile program was thick but lacked definition. It was known as Project Viper. They knew about the Scud transfers. They knew Syria was seeking upgrades. But they were blind to the indigenous program. The name Basil al-Jamil, if it appeared at all, was buried deep in a list of academics who had studied abroad, flagged as a person of minor interest. The genius was invisible, and Facility 771 was, for the moment, just a patch of empty desert on a satellite photograph. The equation was stable, but in the quiet hum of listening posts and the shuffle of bureaucratic reports, the first variables of a new, terrifying calculation were beginning to emerge. Chapter 2. Early Signs. The first indication was not a photograph, nor a human whisper. It was an anomaly in the ether. Unit 8200, the IDF's Signal Intelligence, SIGINT Corps, spends its existence listening to the background noise of the Middle East. In the spring of 1983, analysts monitoring Syrian Air Defense Command traffic noticed a subtle change. Encrypted messages between the Ministry of Defense in Damascus and a new, unidentified signals node in the Kalamun region were using a novel, highly complex encryption key. This was unusual. The Syrians, confident in their Soviet-supplied systems, rarely innovated in cryptography. The traffic itself was mundane: logistical requests, weather reports, transport manifests. But the quality of the encryption suggested the content was protecting something far more valuable than standard military logistics. The node was triangulated to the location of the Kalamun Geological Survey Institute. A flag was raised. Concurrently, Mossad's Financial Intelligence Unit, part of the Lohama Psychologit (LAP) division, noted a pattern of procurement that did not fit any known Syrian profile. A series of shell companies, operating out of Nicosia and East Berlin, were purchasing items with distinct dual-use applications. These included miraging steel, used in ultra-high-stress applications like centrifuge rotors or missile casings, high-specification accelerometers, beryllium, an exceptionally light rigid metal used in aerospace guidance, and most curiously, several tons of ammonium perchlorate. This last item was a powerful oxidizer, the key component in modern solid rocket fuel. These purchases were small, fragmented, and routed through complex chains of custody to avoid COCOM, Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Controls, restrictions. Separately, they were noise. When cross-referenced with the 8200 signal anomaly at Kalamun, they formed a pattern. The Mossad station chief in Paris, operating under the cover of a cultural attaché, was tasked with a fishing expedition. He reactivated a dormant contact, a French professor of theoretical physics at the Sorbonne who had overseen Basil al-Jamil's dissertation nearly 20 years prior. The conversation was informal, held over expensive cognacs. The professor remembered al-Jamil well. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but a dreamer. He was obsessed with propellant dynamics. He believed the future was solid, not liquid, a bit of a poet. He returned to Syria, you know, such a waste. I heard he was teaching geology, perhaps? Geology. The Kalamun Geological Survey Institute. The connection was made. The file for Dr. Basil al-Jamil was pulled from the archives and moved to the active desk of Eitan, a senior Katsa, case officer, in the Somet division. Eitan was a pragmatic, methodical man, a former paratrooper who spoke accent-less Arabic. He reviewed the scraps of information, the encrypted signals, the beryllium, the ammonium perchlorate, and the geologist who dreamed of solid fuel. Eitan's initial assessment, filed with his division head, was stark. We are operating under a flawed assumption. We have been tracking Scud enhancements, Project Viper. I believe we are missing a parallel indigenous program, designate Project Archimedes, led by al-Jamil, aimed at solid fuel technology. If true, this represents a generational leap in Syrian strategic capability, shrinking our warning time from hours to minutes. The paradigm had shifted. The noise had become a signal. The task was no longer monitoring, it was penetration. Chapter 3. The Discovery. Penetrating the inner circle of the Syrian weapons program was considered a near impossibility. The Mukhabarat, Syrian intelligence services, were notoriously effective, and the Republican Guard units protecting al-Jamil's project were loyalists, hand-picked from the Alawite sect. A Western-looking Katsa like Eitan could not simply walk into Damascus. Mossad needed an asset in situ. This is where Ariadne entered the picture. Ariadne was not her real name. It was the cryptonym assigned to her by Eitan, her handler. She was not a high-ranking official. She was a secretary in the Syrian Ministry of Defense, a woman in her late 50s, widowed and overlooked. Her motivation was not ideology. She despised the Israelis, but rather a deep, corrosive bitterness. Her son, a young army officer, had been disappeared by the regime years earlier for a minor, perceived slight against a senior Ba'athist official. Her loyalty to the state had vanished with him. She was recruited by a Mossad agent in Athens under the guise of a German pharmaceutical company who had offered to help secure life-saving medication for her ailing sister. The relationship slowly evolved from favors to finances. Ariadne had no access to strategic plans or technical data, but she had access to bureaucracy. She typed the memos, filed the requisitions, and saw the travel itineraries for the ministry's elite. Eitan met Ariadne in their designated neutral location, a quiet church courtyard in Nicosia, Cyprus. He tasked her with a simple, low-risk objective: Locate any and all internal correspondence referencing Dr. Basil al-Jamil or the Kalamun Institute. He gave her a microdot camera disguised as a simple fountain pen. 2 months later, the breakthrough occurred. Ariadne delivered a roll of film. The contents were mundane, yet explosive. She had photographed the internal motor pool dispatch logs. Most logs were for standard ministry business, but one set of logs detailed a twice-weekly convoy. It was a closed loop, from the Ministry of Defense to al-Jamil's villa in Malki, and then to the Kalamun Institute. The convoy was small, 2 black Volgas and a single BTR-60 armored vehicle, but the security classification was Al-Qas, the special. But there was more. She had photographed a requisition form, personally signed by al-Jamil, for the geological survey. It requested the transfer of 5 Soviet-made KS-19 anti-aircraft guns. Eitan analyzed the report in a Tel Aviv safe house. The pieces locked into place. Geologists do not require anti-aircraft batteries. They do not require armored convoys. And they do not require tons of ammonium perchlorate. The Mossad director convened an emergency session with the Prime Minister and the heads of Ayman, military intelligence. Eitan presented his findings. "We are no longer dealing with a theoretical threat," Eitan stated, his voice calm, analytical. "We are dealing with an active, clandestine production facility for solid-fuel ballistic missiles, protected by anti-aircraft assets and run by a man we have confirmed is a genius in the field. This is Facility 771. This is Project Archimedes." The discovery was a profound shock to the Israeli strategic establishment. All previous assumptions about Syria's capabilities were obsolete. The maps had to be redrawn. The clock was ticking, and they didn't even know what time it was. The order was given: shift all available assets to Project Archimedes. The new objective: establish a complete profile of Basil al-Jamil and the operational vulnerabilities of Facility 771. Chapter 4: Surveillance. The operation now shifted from discovery to systematic observation. This was the meticulous, unglamorous work of espionage that defined the era. The mission, codenamed Operation Shepherd, was to build a complete pattern of life for Dr. Basil al-Jamil. Mossad's Neviot, Prophets Division, specializing in deep cover surveillance and technical installations, took the lead. Damascus in 1983 was one of the most difficult operational environments on Earth. The Mukhabarat had eyes in every hotel lobby, on every street corner. Foreigners were tracked as a matter of procedure. A surveillance operation required a team that could blend in. A keyed-on, bayonet team, the assassins, was useless here. This required katsas with flawless legends, cover stories. A team of 4 was assembled. The team leader, Jonah, posed as a West German hydraulic engineer, ostensibly in Syria to consult on irrigation projects in the Ghouta oasis. 2 others, a man and a woman, posed as a married couple from Argentina, architectural historians studying Umayyad-era structures. The 4th was the mechanic, a communications expert who entered as a Belgian diplomat's aide. Their primary target was the Malki district. This was a neighborhood of ambassadors, government ministers, and old money. It was quiet, tree-lined, and heavily patrolled. The team rented an apartment 3 blocks from al-Jamil's villa, a location chosen for its line of sight to the main intersection he traveled through. The surveillance was multi-layered, physical. For 2 months, the team did nothing but observe. They sat in cafes, drove the streets, and took tourist photographs, mapping every patrol route, every Mukhabarat checkpoint, every blind spot. They logged al-Jamil's movements. He was a creature of habit. He left his villa at 07:30 every morning. On Mondays and Thursdays, the armored convoy picked him up for the trip to Kalamun. Other days, he went to the ministry. He returned home by 18 were. He rarely went out in the evenings. Technical. The mechanic performed the most high-risk task. During a planned power outage, he gained access to the junction box serving al-Jamil's street. He installed a TAP, a passive listening device on the doctor's phone line. The audio feed was encrypted and transmitted via burst broadcast to a listening post in the Golan Heights. The team also used a long-range laser microphone, bouncing a beam off the windows of al-Jamil's study to capture ambient sound. The intelligence gathered painted a complex portrait. The phone taps revealed a man under immense pressure. He argued with military liaisons, complaining about substandard components and bureaucratic interference. He was frustrated, but the taps also revealed his weakness. In calls to his son, a university student in Paris, he sounded weary, paternal. He spoke of his love for French literature and his nostalgia for the academic life he had left behind. The Jonah team's greatest challenge was the Kalamoon facility itself. Getting close was impossible. The perimeter was fenced, patrolled, and designated a closed military zone. Instead, they focused on the supply chain. The Argentine couple, on a historical survey, managed to accidentally drive down a service road near the facility. They were stopped and turned back by a patrol, but not before they could photograph a convoy of flatbed trucks entering the gates. The trucks were carrying what looked like large-diameter, precision-milled steel pipes. The surveillance culminated in a detailed report. They had his routine. They had his psychological profile, proud, frustrated, isolated. And they had his primary vulnerability, his academic vanity, and his connection to his son in Paris. The tension for the surveillance team was immense. Every day was a gamble. The Argentine woman was briefly detained by a local police officer for photographing a government building. She talked her way out of it, claiming tourist ignorance, but the team's nerves were frayed. They had enough. It was time for the next phase. Chapter 5. Confrontation. The confrontation was not with Al-Jamil, but within the Mossad hierarchy in Tel Aviv. With the Shepherd surveillance data compiled, the director convened a red team meeting. The room was divided. On one side was the head of Syria. His position was simple. Al-Jamil was the heart of the program. He was the genius. The facility was just a building. The technicians were just following his instructions. The most direct solution was a bayonet operation. Remove Al-Jamil from the equation. The project would collapse, setting Syria back a decade. It was clean, effective, and permanent. On the other side was Eitan, representing Tzumet, Humant, backed by the head of Amman's research division. Eitan's argument was more nuanced. A removal is a short-term solution, he argued, using the clinical euphemism. It's crude. Syria will eventually find another scientist. They will learn from their security failure. But Al-Jamil's mind, that is the real prize. He is 5 years ahead of our own solid fuel research. If we neutralize him, we silence him. If we acquire him, we gain his knowledge. We don't just stop Project Archimedes, we transfer its assets to Dimona. This was the doctrine of technological acquisition. It was infinitely more complex and dangerous than a neutralization. It meant contacting a high-value, heavily guarded target, turning him and exfiltrating him and his knowledge. The head of Syria countered. "You are romanticizing," he said. "The profile from Operation Shepherd shows he is a nationalist. He is not a bitter secretary like Ariadne. He is not motivated by money. He believes in his work. He will not turn. Your approach will fail. He will report the contact, and the entire network, including Ariadne, will be compromised." The debate lasted for hours. It was a clash of ideologies, the sword versus the mind. Finally, the Mossad director made the decision. It was a compromise that satisfied no one. "We will try Eitan's way first. We will attempt a recruitment, but the window will be short. If Dr. Al-Jamil refuses the offer, we cannot allow him to return to Damascus with the knowledge that we have penetrated his operation. The risk is too high." The order was given. The operation was now Archimedes' lure. Eitan would make the approach. The objective was extraction. But attached to the operational file was a classified addendum, the contingency plan. If recruitment failed, Caesarea's Kaidan team would take over. The operation would shift from extraction to containment. The confrontation was set, and its outcome would be binary. Al-Jamil would come to Israel, or he would cease to be a factor. Chapter 6. The operation. The plan to contact Al-Jamil in Damascus was deemed impossible. The Mukhabarat's ambient surveillance was too thick. They had to lure him out. The vector of attack would be his psychological profile, his academic vanity, and his love for his son. The operation began in Paris. Al-Jamil's son, Khaled, was a graduate student at École Polytechnique. He was a serious young man, devoted to his studies and his father. A Mossad Katsa with a flawless French legend, Simon, began to cultivate him. Simon posed as a headhunter for a major European aerospace consortium. He approached Khaled, praising his academic work, which was heavily influenced by his father's early, unclassified papers. Over several weeks, Simon built a rapport with Khaled. He took him to expensive dinners, discussed theoretical engineering, and finally made his pitch. Our consortium is prepared to offer your father, Dr. Basil Al-Jamil, a research directorship. We are talking a laboratory in Geneva, an unlimited budget, and freedom to pursue his own research, free from military constraints. Khaled was stunned. He knew his father was frustrated. He passed the offer along during one of his weekly monitored phone calls home. "Papa," he said, "a company in Geneva. They want to talk to you. They knew your 1975 paper on propellant binders. They called you a pioneer." As Eitan had predicted, the Mukhabarat tap on the line recorded the conversation. Al-Jamil was intrigued, but dismissive. "That is foolishness, Khaled. I have my work here." But the seed was planted. A week later, Al-Jamil received a formal invitation to a symposium on advanced theoretical physics in Geneva, Switzerland. The keynote speaker listed was a Nobel laureate whom Al-Jamil deeply admired. The symposium was, of course, a complete fiction, created by Mossad's LAP division. The Nobel laureate was not attending. His name was being used without his knowledge. Al-Jamil, flattered by the invitation and prodded by his son's news, saw an opportunity. He petitioned his superiors at the Ministry of Defense. A trip to Geneva would allow him to meet with European suppliers, his cover story, while also subtly gauging the interest from the aerospace consortium his son had mentioned. The ministry, eager to keep their prize scientist happy, agreed. He was given a 3-day pass and a light security detail. The moment Al-Jamil's flight was confirmed, Eitan flew to Geneva. He was now Mr. Steiner, the representative of the fictional consortium. Al-Jamil checked into the Hotel Intercontinental. His Syrian minders took the adjacent room. The first day, he attended the symposium, a rented conference room with 24 attendees, most of whom were low-level Mossad assets posing as academics. That evening, Steiner, Eitan, approached him in the hotel bar. "Dr. Al-Jamil, a pleasure. I am Steiner. We spoke to your son in Paris." Al-Jamil was immediately on guard, but also curious. Eitan kept his voice low, analytical. "Doctor, we should not waste time. We are not a consortium, and you are not a geologist." Al-Jamil's face hardened. He made to leave. "Sit," Eitan said, his voice polite but firm. "Or I can have a word with your minders about the 18 kilograms of beryllium that arrived in Tartus last month, routed through your geological budget." Al-Jamil froze. Eitan laid out the offer. "We know what you are building in Facility 771. We know you are struggling with the guidance package. We know the propellant mix is unstable above 30 degrees Celsius. Your work is brilliant, but your materials are flawed. You are building a weapon that will fail, and it will be used to start a war you cannot win." "Who are you?" Al-Jamil whispered, his face pale. "We are people who respect your genius," Eitan said. "We are offering you a choice. Come with us. We will give you a new life, a real lab, colleagues who understand you. Your family can join you. Your son is already being looked after in Paris. You can continue your work, real work, meteorological rockets, exploration, science, not this crude butchery." It was a masterful psychological stroke, appealing to his vanity, his frustration, and his paternal instinct. Al-Jamil sat in silence for a full minute. The entire operation hung in this moment. The surveillance, the planning, Ariadne's risk, all of it. Finally, Al-Jamil looked at Eitan, his eyes filled not with fear, but with a sudden cold fury. "You are Israeli." It was a statement, not a question. "You think you can buy me? You think I am a traitor?" He stood up, knocking his chair over. "My flawed work will liberate the Golan. Get away from me. I will report this to my security." He turned and walked quickly toward the elevators. Eitan did not move. He straightened the chair, finished his drink, and placed a few Swiss francs on the bar. He walked to a house phone in the lobby, dialed a number, and said a single code word: containment. The operation had failed. Chapter 7. Extraction and Analysis. The containment protocol was blunt and efficient. It was no longer a summit operation, it was Caesarea's. As Al-Jamil stormed back to his room, furious and intending to call Damascus, his two Syrian minders stepped out of their adjacent room to intercept him, alarmed by his demeanor. Before they could speak, two men, the Kedon team, emerged from the stairwell. They moved with unnatural speed. This was not a confrontation, it was a removal. Using neutralized chemical agents, the two minders were incapacitated in seconds, slumped in the hallway, as if they had fainted. Al-Jamil, turning in alarm, was seized. A cloth was placed over his face. He was unconscious before he could process the assault. The team, dressed as hotel maintenance, loaded the three men onto a service trolley, covered them with a canvas drop cloth, and took the service elevator to the basement parking garage. The entire event took less than 40 seconds. There was no noise. The minders were driven to a remote location and left in their vehicle with a large amount of alcohol forced into their systems, staged to look like a drunken misadventure. They would wake up hours later disgraced, with no clear memory of the event. Dr. Basil Al-Jamil, however, was placed in a different vehicle. He was driven across the French border, a routine crossing for the pre-Schengen era, to a private airfield near Lyon. He was loaded onto a nondescript executive jet. When he awoke, he was no longer in Switzerland. He was in a small windowless room, furnished with a bed, a table, and a chair. He was in Israel. This was the second phase, the analysis or debriefing. Al-Jamil was not mistreated. He was given good food, books. He was a guest. Eitan was his only contact. "Where am I?" Al-Jamil demanded, his voice trembling. "You are in a place where your work can be appreciated," Eitan said calmly. He was no longer Steiner. His demeanor was that of a scientist, not a spy. "You have doomed yourself. My government will tear the world apart looking for me." "Your government," Eitan said, "has already concluded you defected. The consortium offer your son mentioned, the symposium, your minders found drunk. It is a perfect trail. You are a traitor, doctor. Your name is being spoken with contempt in Damascus as we speak." This was the first crack in Al-Jamil's psyche. The debriefing was a systematic dismantling of Al-Jamil's world. It was not an interrogation, it was an education. For days, Eitan and a team of Israeli physicists from Amman's technical division simply talked to him. They did not ask him how to build his missile. They told him how he was building it. "Your design for the thrust vectoring is ingenious," one physicist said, "but the graphite seals you are importing from North Korea will crack under the thermal load. We ran the simulation. It fails 68% of the time." They showed him satellite imagery of Facility 771, not just the outside. They showed him thermal imaging that revealed the exact location of the generator room and the propellant mixing bay. "We know about the KS-19 guns," Eitan said. "We also know the 1st Republican Guard Brigade is handling your perimeter. We know Sergeant Ali Mansour is skimming from the diesel fuel supply." Finally, they showed him Ariadne's reports, the motor pool logs, the requisition forms. Al-Jamil stared at the documents he himself had signed, now sitting on a table in his enemy's safe house. His entire project, his life's work, was completely and utterly compromised. Every secret he thought he was protecting was already known. His nationalism, his pride, his genius. It was all for nothing. The secrecy, the stress, the isolation. It had been a farce. He broke. He did not cry. He simply sat back, a look of profound, bottomless exhaustion on his face, and said, "The propellant mixture, it is unstable. The binders are wrong." He had been erased. The Syrian patriot was gone. All that remained was the scientist. For the next 6 months he talked. He drew schematics. He explained his theories. He handed over the keys to Project Archimedes, not for money, not for freedom, but simply because his work was the only thing he had left, and his new colleagues were the only people left in the world capable of understanding it. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The disappearance of Dr. Basil Al-Jamil sent a shockwave of paranoia through the Syrian regime. Eitan's prediction was precisely correct. The Mukhabarat, piecing together the events, the mysterious aerospace offer to his son, the trip to Geneva, the discovery of his security detail incapacitated by alcohol, came to the only logical conclusion. Their most brilliant scientist had defected to the West. The purge was immediate and brutal. The entire senior staff of Facility 771 was arrested. Al-Jamil's deputies, his engineers, even his administrative assistants were taken to Meze prison for questioning. The Mukhabarat operated on the assumption that Al-Jamil could not have defected without internal help. They tore the facility apart, searching for the traitors who had facilitated it. They inspected every wire, every vent, looking for the listening devices that must be there. The effect was catastrophic. Project Archimedes did not just lose its leader, it lost its entire brain trust. The program wasn't just halted, it was dismembered. The delicate, complex work on solid fuel propulsion and guidance systems stopped overnight. The remaining technical staff, terrified of being associated with the traitor Al-Jamil, burned their research notes and denied all knowledge. Syria's indigenous missile program was effectively set back by 20 years. The regime would be forced to double down on its reliance on Soviet Scuds and later, North Korean technology. The strategic parity Al-Jamil had dreamed of would never materialize. In Israel, the operation was considered one of the most successful intelligence coups in Mossad's history. The data extracted from Al-Jamil was a quantum leap for Israel's own rocket program, directly influencing the development of the next generation of strategic systems. Eitan was promoted to a senior position within Summit. The Jonah surveillance team was extracted from Damascus without incident. The asset Ariadne, her position now untenable, was exfiltrated in a complex operation through Lebanon. She was given a new identity and lived out her life quietly in Haifa. For Basil Al-Jamil, the aftermath was a life sentence. He was given a new identity, Dr. Aaron Roth, a supposed Jewish immigrant from Argentina. He was given a comfortable modern house in a quiet suburb of Dimona, deep in the Negev desert. He was assigned to Sorek, the nuclear research center, but his work was purely theoretical, confined to meteorological modeling. He was a ghost. He was monitored 24 hours a day. He was not a prisoner, but he could not leave. He had no passport. His colleagues were polite but distant. They knew who he was, the package from Operation Archimedes. He tended a small garden, grew roses in the desert heat, and read French poetry. His genius was now applied to predicting weather patterns over the Arava Desert. It was a useful, sterile, and hollow existence. He had his science, but it was disconnected from his homeland, his family, and his identity. He had been completely and totally erased. Chapter 9. The legacy years passed. The Cold War thawed, then ended. The Soviet Union, Syria's great protector, dissolved. In the 1990s, the world moved on, but the legacy of Operation Archimedes lingered. Facility 771 in the Kalamun Mountains was eventually reopened, but as a shadow of its former self. It became a storage depot for imported Scud-C missiles. The ambitious indigenous program that Basil Al-Jamil had spearheaded was never revived. The institutional knowledge was gone, scattered by the Mukhabarat's purges. Syria's strategic deterrence remained dependent on foreign, liquid-fueled, inaccurate technology, a vulnerability that would define its military posture for decades. In Syria, Basil Al-Jamil's name was officially stricken. His old university records were sealed. His family was disgraced. His wife, shunned as the spouse of a traitor, lived in poverty. His son, Khaled, who had unwittingly served as the bait, was recalled from Paris. He was never arrested, but his career was over before it began. He was barred from any government or academic position, relegated to working as a low-level engineer in a state-run cement factory, forever living under the shadow of his father's betrayal. The personal tragedy, spun from a web of deception, rippled outward, destroying lives far from the geopolitical epicenter. In Israel, the knowledge gleaned from Al-Jamil was fully integrated. It accelerated the development of solid fuel systems, ensuring Israel's qualitative military edge. Eitan, the pragmatic Katza, eventually retired from Mossad and wrote classified internal histories of major operations. In his notes on Archimedes, he reflected not on the morality of the operation, but its efficiency. "We did not destroy a single building," he wrote. "We did not expend a single missile. We conducted a surgical extraction of the program's critical component, its intellect. The subsequent collapse was a systemic, self-inflicted wound. It was a perfect operation." Dr. Aaron Rother Al-Jamil lived until 1998. He passed away from a heart condition, alone in his house in Dimona. His death was recorded under his false name. He was buried in a small, secular cemetery. There were no mourners, save for two men in suits from the defense ministry who observed from a distance. His legacy in Israel was a stack of classified research papers. His legacy in Syria was a void, an absence defined by missiles that were never built. Chapter 10. Reflection. The Case of Dr. Basil Al-Jamil, the genius behind Project Archimedes, is a quintessential study of the Cold War's invisible conflicts. It was a battle not of armies, but of intelligence, psychology, and technology. The operation to erase him was a demonstration of a new kind of warfare, where the primary target was not infrastructure, but a single human mind. Mossad's operation was a profound success. It neutralized an existential strategic threat without firing a shot, adhering to a doctrine of surgical precision. But it explored deep valleys of moral ambiguity. The erasure was not a simple removal. It was a complex, multi-stage act of deconstruction. First, they erased his professional life. By penetrating his program, Mossad rendered his years of secret work obsolete. They demonstrated to him that his fortress was made of glass. Second, they erased his identity. By staging a defection, they turned his homeland against him, transforming him from a national hero into a reviled traitor. They severed his connection to his family, his culture, and his purpose. Finally, they erased his future. He was given a new life, but it was a life in parentheses. He was a resource, not a person. His genius was contained, controlled, and repurposed for the benefit of his captors, applied to sterile problems to keep his mind occupied while his soul atrophied. The operation highlights the fundamental calculus of the long war. The state is absolute, and the individual is a variable. Al-Jamil was a patriot, but his patriotism was used as a lever against him. He was a genius, but his intellect was treated as a weapon to be seized. The system he served, the Syrian Ba'athist state, was a paranoid structure that Mossad understood perfectly. Israel did not have to destroy Facility 771. They merely had to plant the seed of betrayal, and the Syrian regime's own internal security apparatus would tear the program apart for them. In the end, the genius was erased not by a physical act, but by a psychological one. He was shown that his life's work was futile, his secrecy a joke, and his sacrifices meaningless. He was a man left with nothing but his equations, and he gave them to the only people left who would listen. It was a quiet, analytical, and complete dissolution of a man,